everyone. Today I want to talk to you about the Grisha Trilogy. I read this in December. It was a big part of my reading month, and I have heard countless booktubers, book bloggers, book readers, book reviewers talk about this, rave about this, absolutely love this trilogy. I think I have a little bit of an unpopular opinion, but with the recent hype of Six of Crows, I wanted to jump on that bandwagon. I heard that that Six of Crows is set in the Grisha world, but it follows new characters, and this is more fantasy. That one's more heist, so they're related by world, but not by character, if I'm understanding correctly. But I knew very little about this trilogy going in. I knew it was fantasy. I knew everybody loved the Darkling, even though that he is the antagonist, and that it was set in Russia, and I really don't think I knew much more about it going in, honestly. One of the reasons I didn't really know much is because when I plan on reading a book, I avoid anything about that book. Tumblr, reviews, talks, discussions, even non-spoiler discussions. I avoid them like the plague. So yeah, I knew very little going in, and I want to talk to you about my thoughts. One more thing that I knew going in was that people really enjoyed the first and second book a lot more than the third book. But other than that, really didn't know much. So of course it starts with Shadow and Bone, which was released a few years ago now. I think they were released 2012, 2013, and 2014. I believe that's correct, but I got all of these and they've been sitting around on my shelf for a while, and I wanted to get to them because I want to read Six of Crows. I've had them for a while, why not, right? So I wanted to finish out the year strong, finish a trilogy that's been sitting on my shelf, and that's exactly what I did. So if you don't know what this trilogy is about, it's basically about Lyanna Stark harnessing a power that she didn't know she had, that she first displays while saving one of her friends, Mal. And from there, she discovers she has this power and how to use it, and she grows and trains, and she's basically trying to save the world. It's a familiar trope, cliche that we're all used to, but it was done in a unique way. Shadow and Bone was a strong enough start to the trilogy, although if I'm being honest, I'm a little forgiving when it comes to trilogies. The first book is usually lacking a little bit, and this one was no exception. The characters weren't fully developed, the world wasn't really well developed either, and I forgive that for some reason. So everything was lagging a little bit, and I just forgave it for one reason or another. All of the characters in this were just really underdeveloped. The only one that was really concentrated on and that we really were only getting to know was, of course, the narrator, Elena, and I did like her as a character, but I definitely didn't love her as a character. The plot really did drag on in this, and we're all familiar with that trope or that cliche, like the chosen one to save the world, but it was handled in a special way, unique, different. It was sort of interesting. The plot was interesting, it just kept dragging. While it was familiar, I did appreciate the unique and interesting way that it was taking shape. Up next was Siege and Storm, and there were a lot of characters introduced in this, but only one that I really liked. Although that the world and the characters were developed a little bit more, it was still a huge snore. It was extremely slow, and I just couldn't get into it plot-wise. I understood the direction that it was taking, but it was just taking so long to get there. It was frustratingly slow. There was no action at all, and everybody was raving about the Darkling, and here I am in book number 2, and I'm still not finding the appeal of the Darkling. So I was wondering when that was gonna happen, and I don't know if it ever did. Even though people were loving the Darkling and people were raving about this, I wasn't really sure if I actually wanted to continue on in the series, especially considering that what I heard was that people didn't like the outcome of the third book, and I figured if I didn't even like the first 2 books, what's to say about the third book? But I was talking on BookTube to Adriana from Perpetual Pages, and she said she liked the third book the best, and so I figured, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a try. I mean, I was so close, so yes, I picked up the last book in the trilogy, Rune and Rising. So I held out hope and moved on to Rune and Rising, and for the first 106 pages, I was devastated. It was extremely slow, and I was completely doubting myself moving on with the trilogy, and I wasn't seeing the appeal of the trilogy at all. I wasn't finding the connection with the Darkling like other people were. I was definitely rooting for different people in this book than it seems the majority of readers out there were. It was just moving at a snail's pace, and I was completely over the whole thing. I was ready to call it quits. But at page 106, it completely turned around, the action picked up, and it was nonstop got from there. Every single chapter was like a mini cliffhanger, and I absolutely loved it. It kept me turning the pages. I was sitting on the edge of my seat, and I fell in love with the characters that I was rooting for even more. It made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me feel all of the feels. And I was so happy that I continued on because it really turned around, but it took 2 books plus 106 pages of this book to actually get to that point. Though I wasn't getting the whole appeal of the Darkling, and I wanted to slap Elena sometimes and make her choose the right choice, there is a bit of a love square in this. There is Mal, her best friend that she had growing up, who is also an orphan. There is the prince, and there is the Darkling. And I really liked each of the characters individually, but I definitely had my favorites, and I was definitely rooting for them the entire time. Mal definitely reminded me a little bit of Gale, how, you know, like from the Hunger Games, and the prince really reminded me of Captain Thorne from the Lunar Chronicles. He was sassy and hilarious and just a little bit full of himself, but like in the most endearing way. So I really did like those characters, but again, the Darkling was the antagonist. I didn't get him as like a love interest at all. I really enjoyed him as the antagonist in this trilogy though. There were a lot of characters in this, and I was getting them confused. There were some side characters that really stood out and some that I would just get completely confused. So take that for what you will, but the main characters really shined by the end of this, and I absolutely loved it. So I rated the first book 4 stars, which I think was like very generous, and I gave 3 stars to the second one, which I think again was very generous. And then I gave this final book, Rune and Rising, 4 stars, which I really think it deserves, because the first 106 pages did drag on, but the rest of the book was excellent. If the first 100 pages would have been as good as the rest of the book, it would have been 5 stars from me. So I definitely liked book number 3 the best. I'm so happy with the outcome. If you've read it, you know why, because you know who I'm rooting for. And I'm sorry for those of you that didn't like the 3rd book. Still don't get the appeal of the Darkling. He's absolutely the villain to me, and I think he'll always remain the villain. I'm not understanding how people love this so much. It was supposed to be set in Russia. I didn't get that at all from this. It was supposed to be fantasy and powers, and while it did explore 2 of the powers a lot more than the others, I wish they would have delved deeper into some of the other ones, such as the fabricators. I couldn't help but wonder if I would still care about the characters just as much as I did at the end of the 3rd book and feel all of those things if I hadn't read the first 2 books. Probably not, but I guess we'll never know. But I'm still curious why people love the Darkling so much, and like why they didn't like the 3rd book, because it was definitely my favorite. So those are my thoughts about the Grisha trilogy. If you have read this trilogy already, please let me know in the comments below, and like maybe we can talk about it, like what you liked, what you didn't. And if you haven't read it yet, please read it. I tried to keep this as spoiler free as possible, so I hope you're all having a great day. I'm hoping to move on to 6 of Crows very soon. I'll see you again soon in my next video.